It is Tuesday, June the 30th, 126 days until the midterm elections. And that number is crucial context for the story that's going to be driving the news tomorrow, because in these final months before the first real test of Donald Trump's second term, the president is doubling down on his long advertised but increasingly desperate program. A program consisting of voter suppression, disenfranchisement, and unapologetic corruption as an alternative to doing anything that could win his party a single new vote from someone outside his base of diehard MAGA supporters. And that program of Donald Trump's was dealt one big win and one real setback today by the Supreme Court. We'll talk about the win in just a moment, but the setback is critical, not just for the decision itself, but for how it was decided and what the president and his allies are planning next. Today, the Supreme Court apparently settled the matter of birthright citizenship. Not that it should have been a question in the first place. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution is uniquely clear on this point. If you are born on American soil, you are an American. The exception being people born of parents who have explicit loyalty to another government, such as the children of diplomats. There's a line that runs through American history of before. Ratified in 1868 in the aftermath of the Civil War, the 14th Amendment did something that no document in American history had ever done before. It declared that everyone born on this soil is a citizen. Trump's executive order called Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship, which was overturned by the Supreme Court today, was the culmination of a years-in-the-making effort to cross back over that 1868 dividing line, to return to an America where the government decides who counts and where that decision has, at its core, been about race. There was a notable moment back in April during the Supreme Court hearing about Donald Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. John Sauer, the Solicitor General, arguing on behalf of the government, invoked the popular racist conservative boogeyman on this issue, so-called birth tourism, the idea of foreign nationals coming into the United States explicitly to give birth to American citizens, which led to this remarkable exchange with the Chief Justice, John Roberts.
We're in a new world now, as Justice Alito pointed out to, where 8 billion people are one plane ride away from having a child who's a U.S. citizen.
Well, it's a new world. It's the same Constitution.
It is the same Constitution, for now at least. But a roadmap out of birthright citizenship can be found in the pages of today's ruling. Today's ruling should have been unanimous, but just 6 of the Supreme Court justices rejected Trump's executive order, and only 5 of them concluded that Trump's executive order actually violated the 14th Amendment. The 6th justice, Brett Kavanaugh, swerved. He ruled against the executive order, but not on constitutional grounds. Instead, he said it violated a simple federal statute. Kavanaugh went further. He said that Congress can, quote, enact new legislation establishing exceptions to birthright citizenship for children born to foreign citizens unlawfully or temporarily in the country. But Congress has not yet done so, end quote, not yet done so. Now, clearly, passing such a law would be a lot easier than passing a constitutional amendment to the 14th Amendment. And Republicans heard that message from Brett Kavanaugh loud and clear. In a post on his social media site, Trump lamented the loss at the Supreme Court, but noted what the next steps are: passing legislation in Congress, which is why the selection that's coming up becomes really important. During an interview today, this man, the border czar Tom Homan, echoed Kavanaugh's statement, calling on Congress to act. Mike Lawler, a Republican congressman from New York who holds the only district in New York State that could flip to Democrats in November, said he supports the legislation against birthright citizenship, which is a pretty hard line for a Republican who tries to present as a moderate. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham supports that kind of legislation as well. And now the Justice Department says that it's going to be cracking down on people who come to the United States as part of what it calls birth tourism schemes, which is starting to sound a whole lot like the Obama is a Kenyan-born Muslim and lots of non-citizens vote in elections nonsense. Today was a victory for the law. There's no question about that. But the fact that today's ruling was not more decisive spells real trouble. It reveals that there are vulnerabilities that can be exploited and justices who can be swayed. Threatening birthright citizenship is part of Donald Trump's larger fight against American democracy. It's also part of Trump's ongoing effort to disenfranchise Americans, to make sure that the right people are voting, to borrow a phrase from the ousted former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. After all, if passing legislation is now the goal, they have to win the votes to maintain control of Congress. The Supreme Court issued the right outcome today, but Donald Trump and his allies are already saying that the hits are going to keep coming. They will continue to test the boundaries of the laws and of the Constitution. Joining me now, Cecilia Wong, the National Legal Director of the American Civil Liberties Union. In April, she delivered the oral arguments of the Supreme Court in defense of birthright citizenship. She is a birthright citizen herself. She was born in Oregon to Taiwanese parents, making her a United States citizen by birth. Cecilia, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ollie. Great to be here.
On one hand, we should be celebrating a good decision by the Supreme Court. But the complexities around this and this hint by Kavanaugh that was very quickly taken up by Republicans that, OK, we got the wrong decision at the Supreme Court, we'll do this a different way, is very worrisome.
Well, let's be clear about one thing. To the extent that the president is talking about having Congress pass legislation to try to get around the Supreme Court decision, that is a dead end. A majority of the court held today by a 5-4 vote that the president's executive order violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. The only way for the president or for Congress to get around that is by constitutional amendment. And even that is a dead end for them, Ollie, because the vast majority of Americans cherish birthright citizenship as a cornerstone of American society. It is definitional for us in this country and part of who we are and how we define our nation. So I want to be really clear that for our clients and hundreds of thousands of American families and millions of Americans who support birthright citizenship, we really have to celebrate this victory. And credit goes to our clients and the civil rights lawyers and ordinary Americans who achieved this win today.
Tell me then what these Republicans like Mike Lawler and Lindsey Graham are talking about when they talk about legislation. Now, I have my doubts that they could pass legislation even with the current control they have in Congress and the Senate. But what are they talking about? How would such a thing work?
Well, frankly, I don't know, Ollie, what they're talking about. They seem to be trying to make a stalking horse out of the majority opinion here. And to the extent, again, that they're talking about trying to reinstitute the president's executive order through legislation, that is a dead end. They can only achieve that by constitutional amendment, which the vast majority of Americans would oppose. What they might be talking about is what you mentioned a few minutes ago, and that's the so-called birth tourism. Now, the Trump administration took this far-right fringe theory that would bubble up in odd corners of our country from extremists 10 or 15 years ago, this idea that undocumented immigrants' children should not be, who are born in the U.S., shouldn't be citizens. And he turned that into an executive order issued by the President of the United States. That is profoundly disturbing and is disturbing to millions and millions of Americans, the vast majority of us, who think that this is anathema to who we are as a country. So, but he made this issue of birth tourism kind of his scapegoat, or it's his propaganda, it's his spin. And Congress and the executive branch have already been dealing with this issue of so-called birth tourism. First of all, we're talking about a tiny fraction of 1% of U.S. births, which are, to foreign visitors who are very temporary visitors. And the decision that the framers of the 14th Amendment made looks past these minuscule fringe edge cases. And the wisdom of the framers, the wisdom of free Black Americans who fought for birthright citizenship, was that we don't care about those edge cases. We want everyone born in the United States to be citizens all alike with equal rights and equal opportunities. And we're not going to look at their parentage. This is the fundamental American way.
But these edge cases are what this administration lives for right now. It's the idea that there's these waves of non-citizens who are voting in elections. Donald Trump comes by this honestly, the birtherism of Barack Obama. It's something that stimulates a base. It's nonsensical and statistically insignificant, but it somehow becomes central to a discussion. I mean, if we're going to discuss constitutional amendments in this country, it wouldn't occur to me that this would be the one that we'd start with.
I don't think the American people want to start with this one, Ollie. Like I said, and as you know, as we argued in the court, this tiny issue, a policy issue about temporary visitors who give birth in the United States is really overblown. It's something that the president and others on the far right have blown it totally out of proportion. And to the extent that it is a problem, the government is already dealing with it by prohibiting people from entering the United States for the purpose of giving birth. So what are we really talking about here? The president of the United States issued this executive order trying to make it an issue about illegal immigration. Well, for starters, he's going after legal immigrants, including people who are here on temporary visas that end up being extended for long periods of time, for even years, H-1B visa holders, for example, who are part of American communities, who are contributing to the United States, and who are simply waiting their turn to be lawful permanent residents. And their U.S.-born children were singled out by this president for unequal treatment, to be excluded from the promise that dates back to Reconstruction, that everyone born here is a citizen. I don't think the American people want this. I'm sure the American people don't want this. And if Congress wants to beef up the laws that already exist, to prohibit people from coming into the country in order to give birth, well, you know, Congress can do that. But the one thing that Congress cannot do is overturn today's Supreme Court decision, which is on constitutional grounds.
Cecilia, thank you for being with us. I appreciate your time. Cecilia Wong is a national legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union who argued the case.